All right, so this whole unit has been all about solving systems of equations. Now, no matter what, there are three different strategies that you guys are going to have to prove to me that you know in terms of solving systems. But overall, you still are going to solve them the exact same way. So, for instance, notice that in number one, you have two equations, which means you have a system. In order to solve that system, you need to come up with an x and a y that make both equations true. Now, keep in mind that when you give me your solution, you have to put it in ordered pairs. So make sure that you train your mind to know where the x goes, where the y goes, so that when you get in your test, you know exactly how to give me the answer. Now, keep in mind that when you are solving the systems by graphing, what's the number one thing you need to know how to do? Graph. Because if the directions say solve by graphing and you use substitution or elimination, unfortunately, you won't get any points. Now, whenever you are graphing, there's this one equation that I told you should be very dear to your heart on top of your guys' priority list whenever you see graphing. And what is that? Does anyone remember? Well, if you don't remember, it's y equals mx plus b. That is the number one go-to thing that you guys have to be confident in whenever you are graphing, especially when solving systems by graphing, because literally all you're doing is graphing two equations on the same graph. So let's remind ourselves, what is slope-intercept form? Whenever you have something slope-intercept form, you have your y by itself. And on the other side, you'll be able to identify your slope and your y-intercept just by looking at the other side. So notice in this situation, again, in every situation, your m, aka your slope, is always going to be multiplied by x, and your b is going to be the y-intercept. Now, after you can identify your slope and your y-intercept from an equation, you can use those two pieces of information to come up with a graph. So let's look at our first equation. Our first equation is y equals 5x plus 5. Now, is this in slope-intercept form? Absolutely, because if you notice, this is a y is by itself on the left side. That means you can look at the other side and identify your slope and your y-intercept. Now, your slope is going to be the 5 that's multiplying the x. Your y-intercept is going to be whatever is adding or subtracting, which in this situation is also a 5. Now, that is 100% coincidence. It doesn't always work out that way. Now, let's go ahead and use these two pieces of information to perform a graph or to create a graph. Now, the first thing you always want to start off is the y-intercept. Notice that this is the y-axis. That means that your graph crosses at the 5. Now you're going to use your slope to figure out your next point. Now notice that your slope here is 5. I'm going to put it over 1 so that way I can see the rise and the run. Because remember, all you're really doing your slope is the change in y over change of x. So notice in this situation, what is our change in x? 5. Our change in y? 1. Our change in 1? Right? Our change in y is 1. So what we can see here is that, okay, change in y is 5. So I'm going to go up 5 in the y direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I'm going to go over 1 in the x direction, which is in this direction over here. I think I said it right the last time, right, with the x's and the y's. Moral of the story, change in y over change of x. So what's really important is going to be those rulers, because you're looking to see where these two lines intersect. So you need to be as accurate as possible. And you'll see that in this Promethean board is pretty hard. But I'll try my best to be as accurate, and then you have your ruler to help you out. All right, let's go ahead and graph our second one. Now notice our second equation is y is equal to negative 1/2 x minus 6. Again, we can see that our y is by itself. That means we can identify the slope and the y-intercept just by looking at the other side. I can see that my y-intercept here is going to be a negative 6, which is located right over here. Then I see my slope is a negative 1/2. Remember, the negative means that you are going down. So I'm going to go down 1 over 2. Now you can see here that these do cross, and they cross at that point. So wherever they cross, it's your answer, because remember, when you graph a line, it gives you every x and y combination of that line. So if we graph both of them, which x and y do they have in common? Well, it's wherever they cross. What is the y? The y is a negative 2. What is the x? Negative 2. What is the y? Negative 5. Mixing up my x's and y's, which is a horrible time to do, at least in the review. But you get the moral of the story, right? Okay. So that's cool and all, but look at what happens when you get a problem like number 4. let's say I arrive to the test and I end up with something like this. My first equation is 3x plus y plus 7 is equal to 0. You can clearly see here that unfortunately for us, the y is not by itself. That means we can't identify the slope in the y-intercept. It's your job to get y by itself. So that's why I drew a line down my equal sign to show me a visual of the left and right. That's why I circled the y to kind of train my mind to see, hey, solve for that. Get that by itself and get rid of everything else. So that means I need to get rid of the 3x and the 7. I'm going to start with the 3 because I always tend to start with the x's when solving for the y. Now, I minus 3 on both sides. That means on the left side, I'm left with y plus 7. And that is going to be equal to 0 minus 3x. Now, we all know that when we add or subtract 0 to anything, nothing really changes. So I'm just going to really ignore that 0. And then I'm going to go back and be like, okay, I'm almost done solving for my y. All I have to do is subtract 7. So y is going to be equal to 3x minus 7. Now, can I subtract 3 and the 7 there, the negative 7? No, right? Because one has an x, one doesn't. So I'm just going to rewrite it over as 3x minus 7. You notice now you have y by itself. You can actually now graph it in that situation. So this will be the second question on your guys' test. I'm hoping, again, for you guys to recognize, hey, this isn't a slope-intercept form. I'm unable to graph it unless I have it in slope-intercept form. All right, so do you guys want to take a little break, work on the graph, or you want to go straight into substitution? No opinion? Okay, I'll just work through so that way I don't have to deal with the recording and I can just concentrate on helping anyone who needs help. All right, so the next thing you're going to be asked to do is to solve a system by substitution. And again, whenever the directions say solve by substitution, you have to solve by substitution, or if not, unfortunately, you won't get any points because you got to know the strategy. Now, again, remember how I always talk about substitution? What does substitution mean? To exchange, replace. Think of substitute teacher. Your teacher is gone, you get replaced with someone else. So when you see this system, the first thought that you should be thinking of is, hey, I need to look for an equation that has y equals. Because if I find one that's y equals, that I can substitute. That tells me what I can substitute what for. So if I look at my first one, y is equal to all that stuff. So everywhere I have a y in my second equation, I'm going to substitute that y for 3x plus 12. So here's 3x plus 12. I'm just rewriting my second equation. It's still going to be equal to x plus 8. So that is the first thing, is just kind of getting your substitution down. And then now you have to just solve for the equation. Now, remember, your worst enemy when solving equations is parentheses. Is there any parentheses located here? Nope. So that means you can start solving for your x. But is your x, are they multiple x's or they're a single x? And you can see here that there are multiple. So you need to get them on the same side. Let's go ahead and subtract x on both sides. You end up with 2x plus 12 is equal to 8. Now that you have that x by itself, or not by itself, or you have it on one side combined, you can get rid of everything else around it. So let's start with getting rid of what we're adding and subtracting, which in this situation would be a 12. You end up with 2x is equal to 8 minus 12, which is a negative 4. Finally, dividing by 2, you end up with x is equal to a negative 2. Okay. Everybody agree with that? Okay. Now that's cool and all, but again, you still have to solve for your y. So which equation looks easier? I feel like my second equation looks easier because it's just x plus 8. All you have to do is now substitute your newly found value for whatever variable you found, which in this situation was an x. So y is going to be equal to a negative 2 plus 8. Negative 2 plus 8 is a positive 6. So you finally arrive at your answer, which is negative 2 and 6. Now, if this was a test, if you do not tell me the answer in ordered pair, unfortunately, I would have to mark you wrong. So make sure that you tell me what your answer is and you do it correctly because your y is 6. So that's pretty much it. Okay. I notice that 8, 9, and 10 are pretty kind of the same as just making sure that you only have one equation that's y equal, but you only need one. 11 and 12 are going to be the bonus ones where you have to solve for y first and then substitute it to your other equation. So I'm going to try to make this one a little bit easier. Now the last problem that you're going to get is elimination. Now elimination, again, you're trying to eliminate a variable by adding one side of the equation and adding the other side of the equation to its other side. So just to visually kind of show you, because it's a lot easier to see it than to actually explain it, I put a line down the equal sign, and I'm just going to add one side to the other side. Now if I add the left side here, 8x minus 5x is 3x. What's a negative 2y plus 2y? They eliminate, right? They disappear. So that was your goal, because if you get one to eliminate, you can solve for the remaining one. Now don't forget to add up the other side. 16 plus a negative 7 is a positive 9. And then now all you have to do is solve for the x, the one that's remaining. So x is equal to a positive 3. Now, elimination tends to be a little more straightforward, but there's still a lot of opportunities to make a mistake. When I did this to the last class, I was just in a hurry. I was trying to kind of explain, and I did 8x minus 5x equals a negative 3. Super easy to make a mistake on these problems because there's so much algebra going on. So make sure you're taking your time. What I've learned is if you just remind yourself, hey, dude, take your time, you tend to actually do it, and mistakes are less. All right, so let's plug in a 3. Now, remember that whenever you solve for one, you need to solve for the other variable. Now, which equation looks easier to deal with? And I would say the first one does. Now, you know what x is, so all you got to do is plug in that value for x and solve for the remaining one. So here I go. I plug in the 3 in for my x. I'm going to go ahead and solve it. Now, remember, parentheses are your worst enemy because they make things a lot more confusing than they need to be. So just get rid of them. 8 times 3 is a positive 24, minus 2y is equal to a positive 16. Now solving for y, I'm going to get rid of that 24 first. Negative 2y is equal to a negative 8. And then finally, dividing by negative 2 on both sides, y is equal to a positive 4. So you have finally found your x and your y. Don't forget to put it as an ordered pair. Your x is 3, your y is 4. And now you have 100% if that was a problem on the test. Don't forget that if they don't eliminate, what are you going to do, right? Usually you just have to change it to a negative, and then you'll go from there. So that's pretty much the basics. The rest of this time is just for you guys to make sure that you work out all the kinks to make sure that tomorrow you're good to go.